November 1089 Whiskey, a case for full-length takeoffs. November 1089 Whiskey was a 1973 Beechcraft A36 Bonanza. It has a maximum gross weight of 3,600 pounds. It is owned by Christopher Kuchera, age 46, who has a commercial pilot certificate with instrument and multi-engine ratings. The single passenger is Zachary Hatcher, age 43. There's a photo of Mr. Kuchera and Mr. Hatcher, the aircraft registration, Mr. Kuchera's pilot certificate, and a photo of the accident aircraft. Long Island MacArthur Airport is a Class Charlie airport located in Ronkonkoma, New York. The date is 22 July 2024. The time is approximately 22:05 Zulu. The most recent METAR is winds 150 at 7 knots, visibility 10 statute miles, scattered clouds at 2,800 feet, broken at 3,300 feet, broken again at 15,000 feet, overcast at 25,000, temperature 26, dew point 21, altimeter 3004. It's a very nice early evening in the area. I had flown myself earlier that day just north of there to Bridgeport, Connecticut, and back from my home airport, Essex County Airport in Fairfield, New Jersey. MacArthur Airport has perpendicular runways, 15 right, 33 left, and 6 and 24. Runway 15 right, 33 left is 5,186 feet. Runway 6 and 24 is 7,006 feet. The intersection of these runways is labeled as a hotspot. MacArthur also has a shorter runway, 15 left and 33 right, which is 3,175 feet. At 22:05 Zulu, 89 Whiskey requests a taxi clearance from its position somewhere near taxiway Alpha. The ground frequency audio was not found on ATC Live.
And Bonanza 1089 Whiskey Long Island Tower, where are you? 10 Whiskey from runway 24 as well, intersection taxi Alpha, Sierra Charlie and Bravo.
So in that clearance, you heard them query. Actually, you didn't hear them. What you did hear was the controller respond to their calling him up on the frequency. And I think when they called him up, they requested the intersection 24 Bravo takeoff because the controller comes back on and responds with the word affirmative, as if he is answering a question for them. Again, I don't have any proof of this, but my guess is that they requested the runway 24 Bravo intersection for takeoff. And so we know that they're down here on the left-hand side of the diagram, somewhere in the lower left side, because the taxi clearance he gives them is taxiway Alpha, then right to Sierra, then left on Charlie, and left again on Bravo. A takeoff clearance from runway 24 at Bravo is issued at 22:10 Zulu. The winds are reported at 180 at 11. This creates a crosswind component of 8 knots and a headwind of 3 knots. So they're going to be taking off from 24 Bravo, represented there by the green airplane diagram.
10 Whiskey, wind 180 at 11, runway 25 Bravo, clear takeoff. 24 Bravo, clear for takeoff, 89 Whiskey.
So there is the takeoff clearance. A takeoff from runway 24 Bravo intersection provides 4,092 feet of runway. Here's the performance chart for the A36. And according to this chart, at 26 degrees Celsius with a maximum gross weight and sea level pressure altitude with 3 knots of headwind, the takeoff distance is around approximately 2,000 feet. Based on those chart values, they would have likely rotated near the blue airplane icon from a takeoff on runway 24 at the Bravo intersection. According to the Bonanza POH, rotation speed to clear a 50-foot obstacle is 90 miles per hour. Vy is 110 miles per hour, and that's equivalent to 160 feet per second. At that speed, it would take about 12.5 seconds to travel forward 2,000 feet. If we assume they pitched for Vy and climbed at 500 feet per minute, that's equivalent to 8.3 feet per second. Climbing at that rate, 8.3 feet per second, it would take 15 seconds to reach 125 feet AGL. 12.5 seconds after takeoff, they had traveled 2,000 feet horizontally or forward and reached the end of the runway. By 15 seconds, they had reached 125 feet AGL, either right over the end of the runway or just beyond it, represented there by the red airplane icon. So here's the full ATC recording of the takeoff clearance.
N1089W, wind 180 at 11, runway 25 Bravo, clear takeoff. Newport, Bravo, clear for takeoff, acknowledge. Bravo 2893, advisory at 8 of uniform. Advise uniform, Bravo 2893.
So they take off from 24 Bravo and they rotate 2,000 feet further down the runway, which is about half of the available runway that they had chosen to use for this takeoff. Aaron McCarter with the NTSB said that 3 credible witnesses heard the same thing. They saw the plane take off, everything appeared to be normal until they heard popping and sputtering. One witness said the engine stopped producing power at that point. They were 100 to 150 feet in the air when the airplane nosedived, McCarter said.
Southwest 2893, just hold position, we had a crash in the airport. Hold position, Southwest 2893.
So, again, the red airplane icon represents where they likely achieved 125 feet AGL or slightly beyond that. And the black X represents where approximately the plane impacted the ground after their unsuccessful return attempt to the airport. And this statement here says, considering the loss of power so soon after takeoff, Chris is a hero for avoiding casualties on the ground. That must be reported, his brother Mike Kuchera said in a statement. And these excerpts are both from these 2 articles here. By taking off on runway 24 at the Bravo intersection, they left almost 3,000 feet of runway behind them. If they had used all available runway on 24, they would have likely rotated near the blue icon. And you notice that if they took off at the beginning of 24, 2,000 feet of runway being used, they would have rotated well before the 24 and Bravo intersection. They actually would have rotated before the intersection of the other runway as well. 12.5 seconds after rotation, they would have traveled another 2,000 feet forward and used approximately 60% of the available runway. By 15 seconds, they would have reached 125 feet above ground level, indicated there by the red airplane icon. If they had begun their descent at that point, and again, this does not factor in the so-called startle factor, the 3 to 5 seconds of our brains trying to figure out what exactly is happening. Having said that, if they were primed and programmed to push forward on the yoke once they heard the engine sputter and have trouble, and if they did not wait too long for that to happen, if they had begun their descent at that point and pitched for the landing approach speed of 87, it would have taken about 16 seconds to travel another 2,000 feet. So they likely would have touched down near or just past the 1,000-foot markers represented there by the blue icon and overrun the runway into the grass. But they likely would not have stalled spun in an unsuccessful attempt to return back to the airport. Remember that every good takeoff briefing will have directions for what to do if there's engine failure, fire, after rotation below a certain altitude. Now, from the eyewitness reports, it sounds like that there wasn't total engine failure, but certainly it sounded like engine trouble. And in this case, it's not a complete engine failure, but it's partial engine power. Um, so one of the takeaways for me is that with partial power, the procedure is still the same. With any kind of engine emergency, unless you have enough altitude to turn back, it's pitch forward, straight ahead, and land straight ahead, so as not to even run the risk of a stall spin accident. And so they likely would have touched down near the blue icon and then would have probably ended up somewhere near the green airplane icon there at the bottom of the screen, possibly on the other side there of the highway. The A36 POH emergency procedure for engine failure after takeoff states that landing straight ahead is usually advisable. So where they rotated and then where they achieved 125 feet AGL at the end of 2-4, this is what they likely would have seen. They would have seen the highway in front of them. They would have seen commercial and residential buildings in front of them. And again, if this was a partial engine failure, they may have thought they had enough altitude and airspeed to turn back and make it to the runway, to the airport. But unfortunately, we know they did not. So again, the reason for making this video is to reinforce the importance of the discipline of using full-length takeoffs every time. And the famous quote is, "The three most useless things to a pilot are the altitude above you, runway behind you, and the air in your tanks." So this accident has caused me to rethink how I do my takeoffs, even at a towered airport. When I was doing my flight training, every time we went to a non-towered airport, my CFIs were very diligent about the fact that every takeoff needs to be full length. But many times when we take off from KCDW, my home airport, the controller would assign us 22 at November, and sometimes there would be no one else waiting for an IFR clearance at the end of 22 or the end of 4. But we would still make intersection takeoffs at the home airport. So if anything, this has challenged me to make sure all my takeoffs are full length takeoffs. And certainly not trying to Monday morning quarterback after this incident. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know exactly what his personal minimums were. I don't know what his emergency brief was, etc. I'm just using numbers based on what I know about the accident and trying to reconstruct an alternative scenario, which I think probably would have led to a better outcome if it had been followed. So I want to encourage anyone who's watching and listening to this to always make sure you make a full-length takeoff. All right, safe flying.